Guys, welcome back again. What great conversations we've been having. I mean, I tremendously enjoyed the last panel. It was also great to see an old boy of Cambridge, Dr. Ernest Addison, Governor of the Bank of Ghana, come back again to join us here in Cambridge. We're hoping to see more and more of our alumni featuring in different aspects of the program. Now we're moving on to a very exciting panel, which is about access to quality and equitable education. And we have a great lineup of guests speaking on this. I'm going to quickly move over and introduce Alice Amegah, who's a PhD student at Cambridge as well, who's going to be engaging the high-level audience in what I hope will be an enchanting conversation. So thank you for continuing to be with us. And Alice, over to you.
Thank you very much, Oliver, for the introduction. Welcome everyone to the Access to Education, Equitable Education and Quality session. We will be engaging 5 distinguished Africans who are currently contributing in diverse means to equitable access in education and education quality. They are from diverse backgrounds, as I've indicated earlier. I wouldn't take the honor from them. I would allow them to introduce themselves and also give an overview of what they are doing and how they are contributing to education on the African continent. So I would first allow Professor Moses Oketch to introduce himself and a brief overview of what he has been doing so far.
Thank you, Alice, and thank you to the organizers of this conference. I enjoyed the previous session and glad to be on this session on education. As you all know, education really does matter and is quite important in setting out all the other development aspects. But education is also quite contextual, cultural, political, and complicated. And hopefully today we'll be able to discuss some of those. As Alice has introduced me, I'm Professor Moses Oketch. I am a professor of international education policy and development at UCL, which is University College London. I've been there for about 18 years. I finished my PhD in economics of education in the United States at University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign, and I started my academic career as assistant professor at Vanderbilt University, also in Nashville in the US. Over a period of time, I've also spent time as a visiting professor at University of Pennsylvania, and I spent a period of time in Nairobi supporting research at African Population and Health Research Center as the director of research, but also helping colleagues there to work on the education research, plus many other things. Generally, I was very delighted to accept this invitation. The invitation came via Cynthia, and I have to congratulate her and her co-president, Stephen, for putting this together. In terms of my contribution to education, I mean, I've published widely, probably 100 papers. I declined so many other invitations because people want me to speak on so many things about Africa. Africa is quite diverse. My research is mainly about sub-Saharan Africa in a number of areas. But sometimes I specifically write on Kenya. I have got Kenyan heritage, but I do cover a number of countries. I've supervised a number of PhD students from Africa who have gone back to Africa and are leading work in Africa. So that does give me a great deal of pride. But I've also supervised almost 150 master's students, and some of these have been African students who have gone back to their respective countries, and they're contributing there significantly through what we used to call Commonwealth scholarship. I had a number of students from different parts of Africa who have come to UCL and at the Institute of Education. The Institute of Education is always rated #1 in the world in terms of education. So they do interact with students from all over the world, and that has been quite useful. In terms of what I can say, my own contribution to this area, most of my work in education is policy-oriented research, although I do a lot of empirical work as well, involving data collection, quantitative analysis, plus also just qualitative analysis. And I do cover work in primary education access and equity issues. I also look at technical and vocational education, but I also write about higher education. The only area that I've not covered is early childhood education, which is quite important as a foundational area. But overall, I think that when I look at the work that I've written, but also the many conferences I've been involved in, I'm currently organizing a conference here, which I'm the vice chair of. It's going to be in October at Oxford University. It's called Oketch conference. It brings in a number of people, but I've also been a board member of the Comparative International Education Society, where a number of African students and African scholars do come to. What I see overall is that there's been tremendous improvement in terms of access, especially since 1996. We started quite well. Africa started quite well in the beginning until around 1982. When you look at the graph clearly shows you up to 1982, when structural adjustments were brought in, things really went bad. And that was due to demand management policies, cost sharing that was brought in education and health. And that took a long time to correct. It started to be corrected since 1996. If you look at gross enrollment rates today, for boys, it is over 100, and for girls, it's about 97%. So you can see it's a good trajectory. But 1970, we were already at about 55% or 54%. If we continue with that trajectory in 1970 and went that way throughout, we would have done well. So I think we lost about, the 1980s were lost decade, 1980s and part of 90s. So 2 decades were lost. Literally speaking, everything went down. In terms of equity, the wealthy actually continued. You can see that in secondary education transitions. That actually never dipped for all that period, because the wealthy continued to go to secondary school. The poorest, because of opportunity cost, were the ones who actually were left behind. When you look at tertiary education, again, it did dip, actually. The 1970 were just 1.4%. Today, we are about 9%, which is still very low for a continent. Actually, I had the governor talk about skills. We are only 9% in terms of enrollment participation rate. So I think there is a great deal of opportunity in Africa. My work continues to highlight these opportunities in Africa, but I think this conference, the thing I like about it is to say Africa has to lead and have to take the opportunity. The younger people in Africa today are much more conscious about Africa than my generation and the generation before me. So that is something to be appreciated, because they are proud of their continent. They believe Africa has the potential. They are doing things that older generations didn't do. So I think they are setting the stage for Africa's role in the global arena, and I think education is going to be crucial towards that. The challenge, however, remains access has been great. Quality is a big, complex issue. Equity in terms of gender is great. In fact, girls and boys are participating reasonably equally. If you look at the numbers, it's not really very bad. But the transitions into secondary school is where we are still very low. We only have about 40% participation rate in secondary education. That is very low, in terms of economic transition and prosperity in society. But the final point I want to make is that Africa always conceived education for economic development. Well, that is a big mistake. Education has got a huge amount of externalities, extrinsic values, which we've never appreciated. Until we begin to appreciate that, we will not really fix the quality and equity issue. So long as we believe in the economic transition only, without looking at the broader contribution of education to externalities and what I call intrinsic aspects of schooling, we will miss out. Let me stop there and give the chance to other panelists, but I'm here for the whole hour and be willing to engage with you on the questions that might arise. Thank you again.
Thank you very much, Professor Oketch. We'll now ask Gbemi Abudu to also introduce herself and let us know her contribution. Please, you're muted. If you can unmute yourself.
Sorry about that. Thank you very much, Alice. Thank you very much for having me here today. I'm really excited to be here. So as she stated, my name is Gbemi Abudu. I'm the founder and managing partner of BMGA. It's a EdTech finishing school for the future of work. We provide social and marketing intelligence to increase productivity in the workplace. I've actually had a very, very unconventional background to education, to be honest. I think my foray into education was out of need of what I saw on the continent. I spent majority of my formative years and professional background in the US. And when I moved back to Nigeria in 2014, I moved back working in the luxury industry. I was brought back to Nigeria by a luxury company that wanted to open a fashion subsidiary. I used to work for Louis Vuitton in the US before moving to Nigeria. And it was exciting. It was a great opportunity. But one thing I noticed very quickly after moving to Nigeria is I struggled to find the type of talent I needed for my department and within the organization I worked for. And I had conversations with several CEOs and other executives within different companies. And I realized very quickly that the issue I was having wasn't unique to the luxury industry. It was because at that point I thought maybe it was a luxury industry because it was in its infancy stage, where I realized that it's a problem that exists across the board in all industries. And to be honest, I really didn't think much of it. At that point, I didn't think I was going to create something to try to contribute to solving that problem. But it was after I left the fashion company and I was recruited to be the vice president of sales and marketing for a private jet company, I realized that this is a huge problem, because you make promises to your customers and your inability to deliver on your promise it's highly dependent on the employees you have, for them to have the right skill set to be able to deliver on that, whether it's from an emotional intelligence perspective, critical thinking, and just customer excellence. And it became apparent to me then that this is a problem that exists in Nigeria. And from more research I did, I realized very quickly that it's not unique to Nigeria. It's a problem that existed across Africa and in some developed countries as well. And what became obvious is like fundamental soft skills that are typically embedded into the curriculum is lacking. So when you talk about critical thinking, for me, even I would say the light bulb moment was when I spent the first 4.5 years when I first moved to Nigeria volunteering at an orphanage. And I would teach like early childhood development. The kids I taught were from the age of 4 to the age of 10. And it was in 2018, the founder of the orphanage and I decided that let's teach these kids good manners. And it was when I was doing the research to put the curriculum together for that I realized that what I noticed that the average Nigerian that I had engaged with from a professional context, when you talk about complex problem solving, when you talk about critical thinking, kids are generally very inquisitive and very curious. But with the way, there's a cultural element to it that at a young age, when a child says, oh, why is this? I mean, and I give an example of, I told the kids in the orphanage to always ask why? And they will go to school and they will get in trouble for asking why. And kids are naturally curious. And what you're doing is you're stifling their growth and you're stifling their curiosity. And to be honest, for me, that was when in 2019, I decided to start a company that would focus on how do we ensure that not just professionals, young professionals have the required skills to be work ready and to be successful in the 21st century, but how do you address this issue of skills mismatch that a lot of employers were complaining about in Africa? You have companies that say they have positions, but they can't fill the positions. Why? You had universities churning out university graduates on a year-to-year basis, thousands, but they can't fill them in those positions because they're not work ready, because they're smart from a technical perspective, but the core skills that employers need in the workplace, they were lacking those skills, so that work readiness. So I decided to create a company to focus on that. So we've deployed several classes at BMGA, and what we do is we make sure that every course we deploy has at least three soft skills that are heavily focused on. But what's very interesting is during the pandemic last year in 2020, we launched the BMGA Fellows Program specifically to address, we went into this to address the issue of the gender skills gap. We had this theory going in that you have young women who were sort of at a disadvantage to their male counterparts. But to be honest, by the time the program was over, we realized that it was just a skills gap, not gender skills gap. But what the program afforded us is to address issues that are specific to women that women have to deal with in the workplace. So I'll give you an example. We have different components of the program where you want people to develop their ICT literacy skills. So we have a learning platform where they have to take classes on the importance of reading. We have prescribed reading, and we analyze what they have learned in the books through the lens of what they're learning in classes. Then we have a class called Champions of Africa History. And this is very important because when you're saying you want young women to show up to be their best version in the workplace, you have to deal with some of the issues young women have to deal with, young African women have to deal with, such as colorism. You can't avoid that. That's a reality in our environment. You talk about whether it's the issue of natural hair, how is that perceived, how is that handled? Then, more importantly, you have to address the issue of, it's important that for young women, every single one of us have to pave the way for the next generation. And in order for us to feel that burden, we need to understand the women, the forgotten female African heroes who have paved the way for us. So for every right I benefit from today, being a Nigerian woman, there's somebody who fought for that right. So we talk about that. But what's been amazing about this program for us as a whole has been this issue of access to high quality education. We've been very fortunate to partner with both local universities and global universities, such as professors from Yale University, professors from Thunderbird, experts from UN Women, from different universities. And it's the whole idea of the democratization of high quality education, that it should not be because I don't come from a certain social economic background that I don't have the access. And it's been an amazing thing for us to do so far. So it's focusing on employability skills, because universities all across Africa are going to continue to churn out graduates, and we have to make sure that not only are these graduates employable, but they are competitive on the global scale, where they can stand next to any of their global counterparts and they can go neck to neck with them. So that's what we do at BMGA, and I'm really excited to be here and to contribute to this wonderful conversation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Gbemisola. Would now ask Dr. Utheri Kanayo to also introduce herself, and because of time, would please ask you to be very brief so that we'll connect what you are doing to the questions that I would have to put with you. Okay.
Absolutely. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Hi, everyone. I'm Utheri. I'm a principal of Children in Freedom School. I'm also a Cambridge alumni, so I was really excited when they got in touch to ask me to be part of this conference. So I'm a Newnham College alumni, and I had a wonderful time there. Over a decade ago, I was in your shoes, Alice. I see you're also a PhD in education, so well done. I think for me, what I have to contribute is just my commitment and passion for the right education for Black children, for African children, and not to beat around the bush. I'm done with that. I'm done with trying different kinds of models without getting to the root cause. It's like being sick. Oh, I have a headache, I have a fever, and just cosmetically applying a sort of healing to yourself without really knowing, why am I sick? Going to the doctor or wherever and finding the root cause. So through my years of mentoring and working with Kenyan youth, African youth, I just found a gap of self-efficacy, lack of self-efficacy. You can do great math, you can have a good certificate, and it doesn't matter where you are in the world. I've met youth and even African adults in the UK, in Europe, in America, in Africa, who don't believe that they are as good, if not better, than any other community in the world. And I'm like, what is going on? You have good education, you've even traveled. And it hit me that we lack pride and love for ourselves as African, and to own our African heritage. And so here I was a few years ago, my husband and I, giving scholarships, wanting to take children to school, and not getting the caliber of person that we knew would change Kenya, would change Africa, would shake the world. So we started wondering, what is it? And we saw that it's all about how we feel about ourselves. So what is it that we can teach Africans so that they love themselves and they become these creators, or they feel that even me, I'm ready, even me, I'm good enough like the rest of the world, rather than being fed or led all the time. And it came down to knowing your African heritage, knowing your history, accepting it, and we started teaching it. We started researching about the greatness of Africa, okay? Not just going there to teach gender awareness, to teach entrepreneurship, to teach technology. That to me is like giving yourself medication without getting to know the root cause of the problem. And that's what I have set out my life for. And I'm just scratching the surface because the information is so much. Like, what is it that you can tell African children, teach African children? What knowledge, what information, what kind of models should we implement? So at Children in Freedom School, we've added Afrocentric activities, Afrocentric knowledges on top of the curriculum, okay? We teach them about how great their forefathers were, like the richest man who has ever